Hello, my name is Ryan Norton, and for the kinesiology lab midterm, I am going to be assessing the hang power clean. The phases of the hang power clean can be described in four. The counter movement starting from the bar at the hips, moving to the bar closer to the knees. In this example, we're going to be doing the mid-thigh hang clean. There are other variations of the hang clean, such as below the knee, right near to the floor, to emphasize different moments of the clean. But for this movement, we're doing the mid thigh. So the counter movement, which will be the hinge, the triple extension, in which there is summation of forces into the bar to move it upwards, the catch, in which the athlete gets under the bar as it reaches its peak to try and catch it, and then the lockout when the athlete overcomes the resistance of the bar, locks out the lift. Starting with the relevant joint and muscle movements for the counter movement, we see a lot of the stretch shortening cycle here, where we see a lot of the main agonist muscles acting eccentrically, such as the erector spinae, gluteus maximus, um, quadriceps, and the gastroc and soleus. And so in this moment, we see acetabular-femoral flexion, tibial-femoral flexion, and talocrural dorsiflexion. Um, right here below, this is me from 2 years ago. This is what I like to consider my power clean personal best. And then this is Jose Balavan. He was sponsored by Rogue, a weightlifting company, for some time. He was a thrower at Liberty University, very strong in the hang clean as well. Somebody that I use to better my technique in the hang clean. Looking at the triple extension, we see acetabular-femoral extension, tibio-femoral extension, talocrural plantar flexion, uh, the the hallmark signs of triple extension. We see scapulohumeral elevation to get that extra summation of forces through the traps. Spinal column hyperextension. This is much more clear in Jose's than mine. Gluteus maximus is going to be concentric, quadricep concentric, erector spinae, upper trapezius, and gastroc are all going to be concentric. For the catch and the lockout, all the pictures will be on the next slide. For the catch, we see humero-ulnar flexion, distant radio-ulnar extension. The pronation is throughout the movement, and so I didn't figure that it was worth to mention throughout the entirety of it. Glenohumeral flexion. Um, to get the shoulder up, acetabular-femoral flexion to get into that quarter squat position, tibial-femoral flexion, talocrural dorsiflexion, extension, and then acetabular-femoral abduction. As you can see in the next picture, both of our legs get a bit wider. The type of clean that I'm assessing here is the football players type clean, as quoted by Sika Strength, um, wherein the main goal of the movement is to just produce force rapidly and have that producible force be transferable to an athlete's sport. The lockout, we see acetabular-femoral extension, tibial-femoral extension, talocrural plantar flexion, as we would see in a squat. Looking at the musculature, brachioradialis is going to be very important for flexing the elbow in the pronated hand position. Extensor carpi radialis will help with that extension of the hand. Iliopsoas concentric to bring the hip forward into the catch. Hamstring complex concentric to bring the knee into flexion. Anterior tibialis to bring the foot into plantar flex or dorsiflexion. And then lockout will be very similar to a squat with the gluteus maximus concentric, quadricep complex concentric, gastroc concentric, erector spinae concentric. Jose Balavan gets much wider than me, and you can tell that he catches it much higher. And as far as relative in a squat, his knees are not at much of an angle at all, because they are out so wide. I caught it a bit closer, but my knees were at about 100 degrees of flexion. And so a little bit deeper than a quarter squat for me. But both of us produced a lot of explosive power in our movements. And both of us transferred to our sport that we'll talk about later. So all movements besides the abduction are in the sagittal plane. This is a very sagittal focused exercise. They all have a frontal axis of rotation. Hip abduction has a frontal axis or a frontal plane and a sagittal axis of rotation. I believe this is a closed kinetic chain exercise, just because of how compound the movement is. At some point, you are using the distal part of your body to move the proximal part of your body, which is my thought process of getting this to be a closed kinetic chain exercise, even though the feet do move quite a bit throughout the movement. And I could see how it could be looked at from that perspective. As far as kinetics, we look at two things: the summation of force. We're looking at the contraction, the tensile force of the contraction of the gastroc, the tensile force of the contraction of the quadricep complex, the tensile force of the contraction of the glutes, the tensile force of the contraction of the rectus spinae, the tensile force of the contraction of the latissimus dorsi, or not latissimus dorsi, the trapezius. All of that will play a role into the initial force that's transferred into the bar. And then once that initial force is transferred into the bar, it's all about just the athlete understanding how deep to get under the bar to meet it at that perfect spot to catch it correctly. And with the hang power clean, the emphasis is that you're producing enough force that you move the bar very high so that way you can catch it in a high position. Whereas an Olympic clean, you obviously produce a lot of force. I'm not saying that. But you don't have to move the bar so much, or you can let the bar overcome you in the static position, and you don't have to put as much force into the catch to move it upwards right away. You can go down into the squat and then do the full squat to get the clean up. However, in this, we're looking at the stretch shortening cycle, not something that we see a lot in the Olympic lifts. Um, but in the hang power clean, we see the clear counter movement at the start to lengthen all of the active muscles, and to put elastic force in them to increase muscle contractions when it comes time to do that. For the force application measurement, I did one. So we did mention that it is force summation to move the bar, but assuming that all of the tension was in the gastroc, calculations using a 25 centimeter long foot, fulcrum at 20 centimeters, load at 7, tension force at 5, 160 kilogram clean. That was actually the clean that I was doing in the picture, and 110 kilogram individual. That was about my weight during that time. The load would be 344.3 Newton meters, just because it is such a small distance from the fulcrum. But the tensile force in the gastroc is very large to overcome the resistance. Well, it has to be greater than this value to overcome the resistance of gravity in those rights. The power clean is a power movement, wherein you are meant to move heavy weights fast. Assuming that the bar moved zero point 0.8 meters, weighing 180 kilograms in zero point 0.8 seconds, we come out with a calculation of 1,570 or so watts. Application of movement and motor learning. This is a power exercise, an exercise used in many sports to train how to move explosively. Um, in this study that I've cited here, they compared the power output from the hang clean and the hang clean pull, specifically the mid thighs, compared them to different types of clean variations: cleans from the floor, clean pulls from the floor, clean pulls from a hang position below the knee, and cleans from a hang position below the knee. And both of the mid thigh, both the pulls and the cleans from the mid thigh produced a significant difference in power, relative to the other lifts, which is why these are such a great lift to do. They're very easy to learn, and they teach lower extremity coordination very, very simply. Triple extension is used in a lot of sports. Football, notably. Any jumping sport is going to be involved in triple extension. So we've got volleyball, football. You can see a lot of it in basketball. All of these movements are going to require extension of the hips, knees, and feet to produce as much force as possible against the ground. And using weights to do that and resistance training, specifically the hang power clean, is a great way to achieve that. And here are my references. Thank you.